Chris, you look like you're in. Well, I'll save it for the show.
We're live. We're live.
We're live already?
I need to get a beer. I'm so sorry. I need to get a beer.
Chris just ran in.
I just ran in.
Well, how's everyone doing?
Are we live or are we live just with the intro?
That's
the
live. Question. Episode number 39. DJs and beers. Welcome, everyone.
Cheers. Well, I'm the only one with the beer right now. So
what if we're not really live? And Chris, you just said that, and now you got to say it again.
Cheers. Welcome, everyone. I checked the internet.
We're live. Okay.
Yeah. We're live. Here we are.
Here we are with week I don't know of DJs and beers.
It's 39. I just said it.
39. Because I can't tell from one week to the next. I don't know. Time has just stopped mattering to me.
I just saw it because it says 39.
That's the episode. That's not the week. I mean, how many weeks would it be total?
Do you really want to make it that complicated?
No, I guess not.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter.
I think that's not episode number. That's like week, like how many weeks. Even I took into account the canceled weeks.
No, okay. Episode numbers.
No. Oh, Jesus.
Well, we're not going to get back to that. We're going to.
Yeah, we've done that a lot. But yeah,
David, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Do you think I should drink this out of the bottle, or would it taste better out of the glass?
What kind of beer is it?
It's a. So I got this. I was record shopping at a place here called Disco's Revolver, and I was really depressed that day. And something I've always done whenever I'm depressed is I go record shopping, like vinyl, right? But, you know, of course, I'm not in the mood to buy dance music. So I went to try to buy all my favorite albums all over again for like the third or fourth time.
Oh,
right?
man. The remaster.
Like classic albums, rock, punk, alternative, new wave, whatever. So I was so depressed that day that I had so many records in my hand that the store clerk ran up to me, grabbed all the records to help me, and gave me like 3 beers.
Wow, that's a nice.
As a
Can you show
token
it a
of
little closer?
appreciation.
Can you show it a little closer?
What kind of beer is that? It says Belgian blonde.
It's a Belgian blonde double.
Yeah,
It says Doble Malta, so I'm guessing it's double malt.
Double malted.
I think definitely put it in the glass, dude.
Yeah, I think generally most Belgian beers they drink out of a glass.
Yeah,
like, you don't really see. I mean, maybe like with the cheaper stuff. What's the Jupiler? What's the Belgian cheap? The cheap.
Pintje.
So
you know,
I mean, I had a feeling you would say that, which is why I had a glass ready, and I already feel better about the beer.
I'm just drinking a lager. So
does it bring some sort of level of sophistication to it, or is it just
I feel a bit more
purely about the fucking?
with this, yeah.
Well, what happens when you
That's good, man.
when you drink a beer out of a glass, you get the head and the full aroma versus when you drink it from a can.
Exactly. This is what gives me the sophistication. Now, pinky up or down?
I don't know.
Leave that pinky down, man.
Okay.
You're good with it.
I'm just getting janky with you guys.
You're in a very janky mood today, Ollie. What's going on?
I'm having janky issues with my internet. You know.
Is that why we're missing the background?
This is why, you don't have my typical background. Although at some point I need to figure out like the right background. Kind of like your or I can get into the whole virtual background.
This is a virtual background, by the way.
Yeah.
Is it a virtual?
I could actually.
It's not a virtual.
It's been a while since I've had the virtual background.
Are you in Switzerland now, Chris?
I am literally just walked in. And again, the thing is, and it's probably a recurring theme of this year for me, I again got stuck in a snowstorm, just like last week.
You need to plan it a day before or after.
Man, I left Frankfurt really early enough, and then there was such a snowstorm in the Black Forest area. There was so many accidents. It was insane what was going on there. And that kind of cost me about 2 hours. So, and then I really thought I'm going to do the show out of my car with a phone standing on the side with snow coming down, which would have been comfy and nice. I have some beers in the back, but I literally just made it. I just stepped out of the car, ran inside, opened my laptop, and here I am. So I still don't even have a beer in front of me.
Well, you have time to go grab one. It's okay.
Can I? Well. Oh, that's a nice background, Ali.
That's like from the beginning. That's from like
That's old school, man.
I decided to bring show number 1, the vibes of show number 1 back.
We should do that for the 1-year anniversary.
Yeah, so to answer your question, I am in Switzerland now. It's heaps of snow outside.
Nice.
You look like you're in Japan with that background.
Really?
It's very Japanese, isn't it?
It could be Japanese, or it could be just like in the middle of a little mountain village in Switzerland, which it actually is.
Awesome.
Do you want to get a beer before you
Shall I?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave you alone for a second.
I mean, this is DJs and beers, and I feel like you need to have a beer in your hand, otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take you along. I haven't been in here when did I leave? 10 days ago. So let me see if my beer is still here. Because I have my second fridge, which is just a door to the outside. And there it is. Yeah, you can't see it, but there it is. Hold on. You can hear it.
He took us beer shopping last week. Now we're going to his refrigerator.
Oh, gotta turn that synth down. Don't pay attention to that.
So what do we have to talk about that happened since last week?
Joseph.
Wow.
Well, there's been quite a bit of news, right? Isn't it official? Trump's been impeached.
Trump's been impeached twice.
But
this guy's.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I was so waiting to drink this beer today.
Yeah,
Oh.
Joseph Capriati is, I guess, is
Rough.
recovering in the
Yeah,
hospital.
we send a big hug to Joseph.
Yeah, he actually
at some point we're going to
posted-
have on our show. He's recovering in the hospital. Everyone's pretty much read about, what he's been going through the last week.
Yeah, brutal.
Year, yeah. And Chris you did a stream.
I did another 8-hour stream, I guess. Dedicated
8 hours.
Dedicated to Joseph. I played a lot of his old tracks. He released some tracks in 2009 on CLR.
Wow.
Yeah, it was getting people together in order to send healing vibes towards him. And it ended up being a long journey again, but so much fun. It was so much fun again. And I know we spoke about it last week, that it's like radio, and Ali, and I know your stance to this, but I just had so much fun and I didn't want to stop.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when do you feel like it's time to stop? At what point do you say, all right, I'm going to start, over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to start winding it down musically and then play my last song. And I'm sure you have an idea of what you want to play as your last song, even before you start.
Yeah, usually it's usually the same rhythm somehow. It's usually after like around 6 hours that I feel like, you know what, I'll just wind it down now, and I just get to the end, and then you just play another one, you think of another one, and then at some point you're done.
Do you guys when you play, do you have, maybe we touched on this subject in past shows, but not fully maybe, like, do you have your intro song and like designated, and do you also have like a few choices for like the last song that you want to play? Whether, I guess it depends on if you're closing the night or if you're handing off to someone.
I always have a folder of closing tracks. Or
Me
like,
too. That's what I was about to say.
Not necessarily closing the night, but like ending my set.
Yeah.
I always have a folder of stuff like that.
Huh.
Yeah.
And do you always ask your agent, like, who's playing before me, who's playing after me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always pay attention to that on the rider. I mean, I think it's just good etiquette to be prepared, because you know that some people are going to be playing much harder, or maybe they've got a bit of a softer sound, and I want the transition to be as smooth as possible to kind of just maintain that journey.
The problem is there's with Dave Clark playing before you, there's absolutely
Jesus, man.
Ali,
I'm not going to go down that road.
Ali, could we stop
I just
this
had
now,
to do it.
please? Ali, can we stop this now, please?
Yeah. No, it was a joke. It was a joke. It was just.
I'm going to start defending Dave a little here.
I just wanted to see if you guys are paying attention.
Oh, we're paying attention.
We're paying attention.
I'm not sure what kind of beef you guys have, but let's not get too much into it. All right.
We're gonna have an arm wrestle session on this show, man. We got to invite Dave out.
So what else is going on in the news?
What were we talking about closing sessions things? What's isn't America heading into a civil war next week? What was the thing? What is the idea?
According to your Twitter, yes.
I'll tell you this much: all the people outside my house don't look like they're ready for a civil war. Everyone's just trying to figure out how to find a target with a shorter line.
I don't even own a gun.
I don't know. I mean, Chris, I mean, from your perspective, it seems like we are, right?
I mean, on a certain scale, you probably are, because it's the heat is so up. It's insane. It's really insane what's going on.
Be careful though, because the media has a tendency to overflare the heat a little bit for sensationalism, for ratings and stuff like that too.
Oh, dude, I put that in account. I know that, but I mean, what we've seen last week, what unfolded there is not inflamed, or is not let's say, made bigger by the media because we saw the craziness, what's going on, and there were people killed, and it was really close that there would have been probably some members of Congress executed. Seriously, like it was super close at some points.
Well,
but
maybe we're desensitized. It seems like we just see people getting killed all the time.
I mean, you think, like, look at the school shootings. How many school shootings? You know, every year was another. Like, there was one year there was God knows how many school shootings, and it seemed like it didn't matter. Everybody having access to guns was more important than children dying in schools or being afraid to go to school for fear of another school shooting. It's the world doesn't make sense. I don't know if you guys feel that way about the times that we're living in, but
it doesn't. And I just saw a survey this morning where let me get the number right. 84% of Republicans are feeling that the country is falling apart. And then I wonder who was in charge in the last 4 years. Like, what's going on? It doesn't make sense. It just literally makes no sense, right?
I would have to say 40% of the public in the United States, period, feels like the whole country is falling apart. Doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on.
No, I would agree to that. But I mean, Republicans, we're talking about the people who were in power in the past 4 years with all of their branches, like all of them, White House, Congress.
How reliable is polling anyway? You know, how reliable is polling to begin with?
How long has it been since we've gotten into a fully political discussion on this show anyways?
Never.
Yeah.
We always try to avoid it.
Well,
I feel like Jabba the Hutt, the way I'm kind of... Remember Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi?
Yeah,
he was just kind of at an angle like this.
On the fucking throne with a lean like a true gangster.
He had Princess Leia on him.
Head of the mob, man.
How sexist was that? Jabba the Hutt had Princess Leia on a leash.
Yeah, but don't forget that Princess Leia got up and tied that chain around his neck and choked him to death.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
More power to women for that.
She got revenge.
She was like, fuck this dude.
I saw that in the theaters. Everybody cheered when she did that.
So, hey, Mo, we have a guest who's a good friend of yours tonight. So I would ask you to tell us a little bit about him.
Well,
before we get
we are inviting somebody who was a great deal of an influence on me in my childhood and my youth growing up. Somebody who was part of a band that I feel, and I would say many people would agree, had a huge influence. You can practically spot out the influences in just about every modern version of industrial music today. And I don't think that the music would be what it was if it wasn't for Cevin Key and the Skinny Puppy crew. So today we're bringing him on and having a little bit of a chat. Anybody else want to say anything?
I mean, I was a massive, it goes without saying, I was a total punk, industrial, new wave, goth kid, and I was a massive fan of all those early bands, but especially Skinny Puppy. They just had a certain sound and a certain aesthetic. They didn't sound like anyone else. They didn't sound like anybody else on the scene who was doing,
Yeah, absolutely. It seemed like it was a new face of industrial in this kind of second wave past the more experimental Throbbing Gristle thing that was happening. And they brought a hard dance edge to it with a live show that was absolutely epic and would influence anybody who was in attendance. So, Cevin, are you still here with us?
Well, let's find out why they had such a different sound.
We can hear you, but we can't see you. Hey, there he is.
There you are.
Welcome.
Greetings.
Hi,
What's
Kevin.
going on, man?
Welcome.
You're in
Oh, that's
outer
a cool
space.
effect.
How are you?
Judge me. How good was my introduction there? Did I fumble that one up?
Was there an introduction?
Yeah.
Kevin, what planet are you beaming your signal down from?
I'm in LA, which is right now, as you said, another planet altogether.
Absolutely.
Even though 3 of us happen to be in this, we haven't seen each other in an eon century.
Exactly. Light years away.
Yes, sir.
Wait, Mo, when did you meet Kevin? Because this was all, when you told me you guys were friends, I lost it. I couldn't believe it. Because I've been such a long time Skinny Puppy fan. Kevin, I saw you guys at the old 930 Club in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you remember playing there. But
Few times. I remember playing at the first 930 Club when it was a smaller one, and then
exactly, that's the one I saw you guys at.
Yeah, we were the opening act for Volcano Suns, if you can believe it. The first time, it was our first U.S. show that we ever did. It was in 1985. Believe it or not, we snuck across the border from Canada, and we all snuck across the border and did our first tour that way. It was quite insane because we had a van too, full of gear.
Wow, and you hail from Vancouver. Are there, besides you and a lot of the others who we'll mention as we go through the show, was there a big scene in Vancouver at the time? What influenced you to go into this style of music?
Most notably, what was the scene? Everything was based around a lot of fantastic clubs. There was a club called the Love Affair, and I think the original inspiration. I started working there in like late 1979, because every time I walked in, maybe the second time I walked in there, I heard Fad Gadget or The Normal, TVOD, I think, and I ran to the DJ booth and I said, "Who the hell is this?" And then he played a couple of other things, and I kept on running to the DJ booth to see what it was. I mean, I was only 18 or 19 at the time. So I figured I better get a job here, and I became the light man. And I just started taking down the names of all the artists that I was hearing on a nightly basis. And then somewhere along the way, there was like this rave culture that happened. I don't mean proper rave culture 93 style, but like this was in the 80s. So it was like early 80s, we had what would be called like, I don't know, you can't call them after parties because they were sort of like a regular weekly thing. There was a sliding door in an alley somewhere. You go up and knock 3 times, and the door would be open, and you'd go in, and there would be literally a club of people going on, which I actually couldn't believe that was possible, but it was so amazing. So with that late night thing, there was a lot of fuel at the time going on, like probably MDA, I think, was probably the thing that was keeping people up all night. And don't want to leave out that detail probably, because
MDA was like an amphetamine, wasn't it?
I don't know the definition of it. I don't even know what it was actually, because it seemed to change from time to time.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that the music started getting notably harder and darker. And I want to attribute, say, Liaisons Dangereuses, the first that album. First time that started hitting, we're talking like 83. Then it started to be notable that music was, we were familiar with Robin Gristle and Cabaret Voltaire and this sort of side of music, but we started thinking, I just want to make a really drum production heavy style music that will take the ethics of what what we were into and apply it to these late night clubs. So really the first goal was to have music to play at these clubs.
Oh.
And so I read that you started out as a drummer for a band called Bastille, right? So was rhythm your foundation? Was that, what interested you initially? Like,
absolutely. My mom, when she'd go into the bank and leave me in the car as a kid, she'd sometimes leave like the turn signal on or the windshield wipers, and immediately I was picking up that as a metronome.
I was
used
totally
to do that
into
same
that
shit, man. I did that same shit.
It would be automatically tapping rhythms. And then so my dad got to the point where he's like, shut the fuck up, quit tapping. And he threw me downstairs with practice pad. And then it worked its way up to like a snare drum. And then of course the first drum kit. And my friend, luckily, Mike, he was like an amazing drummer. So he kind of came over and was like he'd sit down at the same kit that he'd leave, the room with you. And he'd do this amazing, Buddy Rich style drum solo, just be like mouth dropping and leave me with the sticks. Okay, here you go. And I think that was an impetus to really, develop rhythm. And then I guess I started thinking, okay, this is going somewhere when my mom would come down and she'd start dancing. That was like a first breakthrough. And then of course the second, as I said earlier, you have a breakthrough. It's always goal related in a weird way. So the second breakthrough was to make some music that, could eventually get played in those clubs.
Yeah.
So that is really another Kevin. Hi, by the way, I'm Chris.
It's nice to meet you.
We all didn't say hi.
I'm familiar with you guys through your music and not through your personality. So it's great to meet you.
Oh, nice. That's another sign of how important I find a healthy underground club culture is in the country. And I assume that was in Vancouver, right?
Yes.
And how was the rest of your environment, like your family? Was they all supportive towards you making music then?
Yeah, my mom was like, when I made the second Skinny Puppy album, Bites, I brought it home and played it, and my mom was dancing. And my mom was like, 57, 50. She passed away at 58, so she was hearing it at 57. And like one of her last things that I was also in this other band that was quite commercial called Images in Vogue. And so when I joined this band in like, say, 1980, it was like sort of fashioned after New Wave and like the whole sort of, we were inspired by Japan. Japan and Yellow
David
Magic.
Sylvian, right? David Sylvian's project,
Yeah. And so the guys were extremely dedicated, and I have to thank them because I wouldn't have been able to learn all the stuff I did about synthesizers if it wasn't for all these guys that were in this band. Each guy, there was 6 of us, and each guy had a different setup. Each guy had a particular love for either Oberheim or Roland, or at that time, one guy even had the first sequential circuits, Pro 1 and the Prophet 5. So with that training I got from these guys, immediately I started to see that, well, I'm making a style of music, and it was quite popular in Canada, but it wasn't really like my style of music. So as soon as I put my, it was funny, I was at a party and I had quit doing the MDA, but a lot of other people had continued to do it. And so there was a TR-606 and a Pro 1 in the corner and an amp and a couple of cables. So I plugged it in and started jamming. And before I knew it, it was like, okay, it's music for the party. And then a guy came up to me and showed some interest in it in a way that I thought like, hey, why don't you write some lyrics and I'll record you later to this track. And that ended up being how I met Ogre from Skinny Puppy, if you can believe it. So everything has been by accident in a weird way.
I remember playing a club called Celebrities quite a bit in Vancouver. Was that a club that was around in that period of time, or that came later?
That was a little later.
That was a little later. Okay.
Sounds very fancy.
Huh? No. It was. I think it was
Celebrities.
It was like a gay club that they started. Some promoter friends of mine started doing events at, and there was a period of time where it had like kind of a rebirth. And I think it's still there, and they ended up, the same guys who used to book me back in the day in the 90s, early 90s, they bought it, and I can't remember the name of it right now. They're going to kill me, but I can't remember the name. But
I think I played in Vancouver one time, and it was inside of a morgue. It was like an illegal underground party in an old morgue. Brutal.
Wow.
So I should probably say I've been living in LA for 23 years, and the city of Vancouver has changed dramatically since then. And so, a lot of like even the culture of there right now, I couldn't even tell you what's happened to it. All I know is that all the old clubs from the old days are gone.
What brought you to LA?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
believe it or not, I couldn't take the months and months of rain anymore. I mean, I love Vancouver, and it's a fantastic place. I mean, on a summer day, I don't think you can beat it, but because it's not that hot in the summer. It's like, mid 70s. So my initial thing was, I had been searching for like a home base to put my studio and live for the longest period of time in Vancouver. And there wasn't, for some reason, anything practical. Everything I looked at was like, at that time, seemingly hugely overpriced or underspaced. So I came down and visited some friends in LA, and they said, hey, my friend's a real estate agent. He's showing a house today. Went and started looking at this house, which led me to look at another house and so on. And then finally, I just opened up one of those, those real estate magazines we used to have here in LA, where it'd be like real estate. You open it up and see pictures of houses. I saw this one. It was like 1928 Spanish style house with recording studio. You must see this before it's sold. So I said, okay, I'll go look at that. And then the guy that was selling it just said, these guys really want to sell this house. And I'm going, okay. Came in, and there was a band set up in it. And I thought, like, wow, you guys can rehearse in here without any noise complaints? I said, oh, no problem. This neighborhood is perfect. And so I made an offer on the house that was like $40,000 less than what it was at the time, and ended up getting this house for the price of an apartment in Vancouver. And what was awesome about it is that I'm able to build a studio and live and do all the things that I wanted to do. But then soon the neighborhood started telling me stories about the house, which I couldn't believe. So they said, you know that Somewhere Over the Rainbow is written in your house? I'm like, what?
No shit.
Yeah, and so this is being told to me by an actor that lived next door that was like the traveling doctor from Little House on the Prairie. And I'm like, I know your face from somewhere. And he's like, oh, I'm all over the place. By the way, I want to tell you the story about Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Did you know that Harold Arlen wrote the entire score for Wizard of Oz in your house?
Whoa.
Wow.
Are you kidding me? He said, the story is, after they finished writing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, they had a party where they got so drunk that they said, we need to swim. And so I have a swimming pool back there. And then they said the story was that the pool was first dug as a pit filled full of water, and they had like a mud party after they'd written Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So it's like, as soon as I heard that story, I started thinking, this place is just unbelievably weird. I've had friends feel like ghost energies in the house. So one friend knew the official pet psychic and was calling the pet psychic to come over to see her pet, ironically at our house. No backstory, nothing. So the lady, she knocks at the door, she comes in and she goes immediately, ooh, musical ghost. Wonders what you're doing, has no idea what you're doing, was very interested. And I said, oh my God, this is just like, without any backstory or anything, I started thinking that it's got to be the ghost of Harold Arlen in this house.
Are you still in the same house?
Yeah, 23 years.
Wow.
Kevin,
You have to imagine that Kevin Key lives in a house full of ghosts and ghostly specters.
That's what I was saying. Like,
It's very fitting.
You ever had any weird stuff happen?
I mean, everyone has attested that's been in the house to possibly have, if they've stayed here for a while, that they've seen or heard or seen things moving. What's happened to me is that I've been in the studio many times, and I've heard distinctive walking footsteps above me on the floors. And I mean, I go home. I've gone up there to see if my wife is home. I'll be like, hey, start talking to her, and there'll be like nobody there.
Oh shit!
I'll be like, that's very odd. My wife has seen things. Just even the other night, a brush turned on the counter, and then she got the brush of cold wind. I've had singers come over, and then when they're in the room, locked away from everybody else with their headphones on, think that they see shadows and stuff. So Dre, my former roommate here, saw an old guy at the top of the stairs. People have been locked in a bathroom here.
Do you have an episode of Ghost Adventures already filmed there?
I mean, it really should.
Look, I'm not very big on paranormal, I'll be honest with you, but I gotta say, if that shit was going on in my house, I'd get the fuck out right away, dude. I would not be hanging out there for very long, man.
I see it as good stuff because, like, you know, being here 23 years, I've not ever felt a negative thing. It's always been somewhat. I like that feeling where you know you've seen something strange, and that goosebump feeling that you get, and that cold feeling you get. It's kind of become almost a little bit enjoyable, I have to say.
I mean, so far, nothing
Ghosts.
has happened to you. You weren't attacked so far, so it's probably some friendly souls that are haunting that, right?
Fair enough.
That's what
Maybe even some inspirational friendly souls.
So have you ever also felt that when you're making music in your studio that sometimes you feel like you're channeling an energy that can be there, that you maybe just sort of helping to contribute to maybe the possibility of your take or your track?
Hey, that's
Totally.
funny. It's funny that you say that. You know, my mom's Middle Eastern, and she would oftenly tell me this story about how in the old Middle East, even pre-Islam, um, most artists and people who created music believed that their inspiration came from some sort of divine entity that was external from yourself. So that when an artist created something beautiful, or a musician made something, or a dancer would dance amazing, it was never really the responsibility of that dancer. It was always what they would call the jinn that would basically enter their body and show you some sort of divine creation. So therefore, when somebody would fail to write or write a better piece of music or do another painting that was as good as the past, it wasn't necessarily their fault. It was just the fact that the jinn didn't visit them. So I've always decided that if I'm going to write a shit album, it's not my fault. It's just that I didn't. It's just that I didn't get that spiritual experience that I required.
Yeah, that's the
But
thing. Like I was born in Iran. I grew up a Muslim, but I was never religious ever.
Yeah.
I don't even want to start talking about religion, but I always felt like being spiritual was something completely different than religion. And I did feel, like you said, Kevin, every once in a while with certain projects, you do feel like there's a spiritual presence kind of guiding your hand or your ears or whatever in the studio. Some projects just materialize in a really effortless sort of way where like, everything that you want to do. You kind of in your head and in your ears, you can kind of hear the end result, and you can get to that end result quite quickly.
I think isn't that the zone that you try to be in there, the zone where you are working with your equipment, but you're not thinking anymore, and you're just basically open for the creativity because your thinking is not blocking it anymore. And the better you know your machines, the easier it's just like you just basically watch your hands doing stuff, and sound comes out, and you're just like, yeah, fine, I'll go along with that. I think that's the zone that you're striving for usually, isn't it?
Yeah, have you ever had a situation where you'll lay down a track and then you'll come back and listen 5 days later and you'll say, wait, that sounds like a little bit different, and maybe not so different, but I'm interpreting it differently than when it went down. And in some ways, I don't want to judge something right away, like until I listen to it, like say with fresh ears later when it's not running through my head. And then so sometimes, have you ever had that situation where I love to use like random found sound? So back in the day, I used to love to run a radio station not tuned into a station, but like sort of halfway
in
between
between,
things. Yeah, and then so I'd like to do a live take sometimes of like to add that texture to some certain sounds, and then so in a way something is contributing from the outside to the end result, which is sort of like live and improvisational. So sometimes those takes become uncannily just strangely organized. In some cases, like people have asked me, where did the sample in the song Stairs and Flowers? I just fell down these damn stairs. Believe it or not, things like that. Like I turned on a radio and it happened to be tuned in. I tuned in and out of what was a live radio network, and all of a sudden I just flipped down the damn stairs. And later people interpret all these meanings and things out of chance, or out of improv that draws upon I don't know, the outer
Probably
realm.
trying to project
Yeah.
some sort of deeper meaning into something that just kind of happened naturally.
No, but I think those improvisations don't happen by themselves. You might think that's an accident, but you basically unconsciously probably were working towards this in a way, right?
I think
hope
if you're existential, if you believe in existentialism, yeah, you believe that you affect everything that's happening. I think there's things that happen that are quite intentional, and then there's like happy accidents that I think a lot of people think when they listen to our music, they think a lot of what we do, especially the stuff that becomes quite popular that we do, like they're super intentional. Like we intended to do that thing. They don't realize how many things in the studio are just happy accidents.
Happy accidents.
But you're able to identify it as such and zero in on it, and maybe in some ways like leave it alone, and not fuck with it, right?
Isn't that what attracts you to your own idea, is that you say, oh my God, that's such a great happy accident there. That's what I'm looking for in my idea. That's how, like, if I say write 5 demos and one of those demos has that happy accident that I feel I can't explain, or it was not intentional, that's the one I'll be most interested in.
Yeah.
I actually learned this year to invite those happy accidents more and more and more. But one thing that I want to mention, Ali, could you get rid of your virtual background? It's so weird that you're like zoning in and out. You look so artificial somehow.
Well, that's insulting. Maybe he was really proud of that fucking background, man.
Well, it definitely wasn't an accident. That's
By the way, does this beer count in this world?
Oh
yeah.
That's
Is
the
this
point.
Totally does. It totally does. Cheers.
It translates to what's going on.
Kevin, you had
Coronavirus.
Kevin, you
Extra.
you had some serious initial early success with Images in Vogue. I didn't know that like when I was researching for this, I didn't realize how prolific. It's insane how much you've done. I didn't know about a lot of the side projects that you had, and Images in Vogue I was listening to earlier tonight, and it kind of reminded me of, because I was a massive like Ultravox fan. I mean, the vocals weren't like mid yours, but musically, I think it was coming from, I don't know if you would disagree or agree, coming from the same place, but you had quite a bit of initial success with that project. You were opening for, in Canada, you were doing tours with Depeche Mode and Roxy Music.
Duran.
What was that? What was that like to have so much early success? And then how did your sound in Images in Vogue give way to the harder edge sound of Skinny Puppy? Like, what was the catalyst for that evolution in your sound?
It was those late night clubs. Really, as I explained earlier, it was really meeting Bill Lieb one night in a club, and he took me back to his place with him and his girl Debbie Jones, and they were DJs, and they had a DJ set up there in their place, and they spun a set that contained everything I'd never heard before, basically. Second Layer, Grauzone, Durplan, just the most out there versions of stuff that, I thought I'd heard everything with Robin Gristle and stuff. No, it just was really, the door was just opening. And then soon thereafter, Dave Henderson made a compilation album called the Elephant Table album, a compilation of difficult music. And it basically was an introduction to what was then became known as the Wild Planet scene. This was the birthplace of bands like Coil, Nurse with Wound, legendary Pink Dots, and it was really, it seemed like so unified that at that time, when I was still in Images in Vogue, but as I said, I made music at a party or music to try and do this. I almost all of a sudden realized the personality of the music that we were making fit perfectly into this scene. And so they brilliantly enough put all their contact addresses on, and I immediately just contacted the guys from Portion Control and Nocturnal Emissions and the guys from In Phase Records, and they immediately said, well, they offered us a record deal. And before we knew it, we were kind of like being inducted into the Wild Planet scene, which was kind of like a regular weekly thing in the Melody Maker magazine in the UK. And that was really like the impetus for to say like, well, I know I was in a successful commercial band that, you know, it was fantastic, by the way, to tour with Roxy Music, on tour with Duran Duran, and tour with Depeche Mode on their first tour and second tour. But like, it was just, you know, when you're playing a music that's, as you said, very ultravox and or could be seen, you know, in a certain light. It wasn't like the music where I'd sat there at home and would just come up with, which I'd then link with other people, and that would become the next wave of where I'd find myself. And then before too long, my friends, you know, were saying, you should focus on this. And so that's what I did.
Well,
That's awesome.
Um,
You also had a band called the Tear Garden with lead singer of the legendary Pink Dots as well.
Yeah, so as I said, through the Wild Planet scene and the meeting of all these people, we eventually started exchanging tapes. And in those days, it was awesome because, you know, it was a tape network. There was no internet, there was no anything. We all exchanged things on cassette. So there was a vibrant scene. And so around 1985, we started to get proactive in Vancouver and started to see how we could possibly bring some artists over. Yeah. And I think Edward Caspell was one of the first that came over and did a solo set, 3 nights, and he asked me to be his sound man. So that was how we made the connection. And while he was in town, I gave him a song and he wrote lyrics, and we went in, and it was like one of those things where I was a huge fan already of their music. And then so all of a sudden to hear him singing on one of the tracks that I made almost just seemed like too unreal. Sure. So there was the huge inspiration, and luckily we both shared that same outcome. And I think now we've made like 10 albums since 1985. It's just amazing to work with him. Fantastic person and fantastic creative energy.
Yeah. Man, you've had so many aliases and so many side projects, and there's just been so many records that have been released. It's incredible how much output you've put over all these years.
Yeah, so sometimes I have to remember myself if I made that or not. Like I'll have to Shazam it or something.
I mean, it's quite a catalog.
Cevin, you met Kevin Ogilvy. Was it 92, 82? Is that when you guys?
83, when I first met him at that party.
83, you met Kevin at that party,
and then he just wandered up. Actually, you know, I'll tell you a funny story about that. So before that, in 82, I was a cashier at Safeway, which is like a food store in Canada. And you know, I had to wear like an orange outfit with a tie, you know, the whole bit. And for some reason, like they always put me behind the cash register instead of stocking shelves because they learned that I was pretty quick at it. But it was my nightmare, actually. It's just this revolving table of food coming at you endlessly. One time this guy walked in and I saw him and I thought like, wow, he's a different looking guy. And then he came through my lineup and I checked him out and said, you know, did his thing. And so the first thing that I said to him when I saw him at that party was, hey, I'm your Safeway cashier. The weirdest introduction, actually.
Is that, wow, that's an amazing story. Like you guys met for the first time at a Safeway. And
so I guess we could thank Safeway for Skinny Puppy then.
Yeah, well, what's odd is that he was at that party after as well. I didn't think like, you know, what are the possibilities of that? And then I don't know about you guys, but every day it's a small world theory always plays out.
Yeah.
In some way for me, it's like we're all connected somewhere down the line, you know, in some weird way.
Yeah.
You were already immersed in music. You were, you know, producing. Was he doing vocals, you know, for home demos, or was he working with someone else? Was he interested in forming a band? How did that happen? Like,
but did you convince him on that party to do vocals?
Well, he showed the interest, and I think when I was playing along, he came up and he was kind of started, mouthing and verbalizing some things that I said, oh, you definitely got the idea. I had no idea. Well, I later learned that he hadn't really had any experience before that in anything, but he was extremely literate. So he was reading, Lautremont and all sorts of like really interesting books that were quite deep. And so I figured he just seems like he'd be the right guy to say, hey, write some lyrics and I'll come back later and record you. And what's funny is that song with that recording is released on our first cassette. It's called K9. So the jam I'm talking about and that this performance is available to hear. Just pump it in on YouTube.
Wow. When you did that, when this party, like at that party, the way it happened, it kind of seems like it was a blueprint already of how you would be working later on. Like you're laying out the basic ideas and he's coming up with the lyric ideas. Can you tell us a little bit more about your production process with Skinny Puppy and how it evolved over the years then?
Yeah, so we've always had the same process where the music will always come first, and an idea will get written from beginning to end, and then I'll look at how much it might inspire Ogre when he'd hear it. And so often I'd fire him a cassette that would have 20 ideas on it, and him and Dave Ogilvy would pick 10 ideas, and we go into a studio, fantastic studio, Mushroom Studios in Vancouver, and that was our home for the better part of 9 albums. And it was I mean, that's the thing I miss most about Vancouver is that studio.
What was the
you
engineer that you were working with?
So was that where you worked with Ken Marshall already? That
Ken didn't come along until Raby's album, which was like 88. So essentially, so the first Remission, our first album, and Bites, and then half of mine, The Perpetual Intercourse, I made just me on music and Ogre on vocal. And then I met Dwayne Gettle in Edmonton in December of '85, and he was opening for Skinny Puppy with a band called Water, and it was a one-man band with hugely complex setup for the time, and I was blown away. I thought, wow, the guy's amazing. And at the same time in Vancouver, Bill Lieb showed an interest in wanting to start music. So up to that point, he hadn't had a band or anything that was recording or anything. And so we went to the store and bought his first Mini Moog in a Porta studio, and I kind of set him off on his path to making songs. And so thus was the birth. Well, Bill toured with us for our first tour of Skinny Puppy, but then soon thereafter, Bill started realizing that, like with me, he had his own ideas. He didn't want to tour anymore if that first tour was kind of rough. And so he said, okay, I'm going to form Frontline Assembly. And then at that time, I didn't think he'd ever tour, but since then, he's also been extremely prolific. Yeah. So as I said, I met Dwayne, and then that formed the basis of a solid partnership that we started in 1986 July, and we made a better part of 7 albums for Skinny Puppy before he passed away in 1995. And so the procedure remained the same. Music was always written first. The setups varied over time. It started very analog based, so everything was written based around a TR-909 and a Pro 1. DX7, Juno 106, SH101s being triggered from the Pro 1. I don't know how we were dealing with sync. I mean, it kind of, when I look back, I'm still kind of amazed at the beginning that, we were laying stuff down to 2-inch tape that was, largely from an analog world. Yeah. So you had to I remember having to lay a lot down on the first take. So the drum performance, as well as the whole Pro 1 performance, and then base everything from there. But then 1986 came the Atari 1040 ST computer, and then while in the first European tour, I saw the first computer sequencing software called Steinberg Pro 24. I believe it was the first program that Gerhard Lengling designed that went on to design Logic, Cubase. And I saw that and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And immediately I thought, like, we should probably find that. So we found it, got that in 1986. We started recording using that medium. And so then we were switched over to a largely sample-based sort of setup that was Emax, S900, ESQ. Those were the main additions that went along with the analog setup. And then that sort of people will say, well, what period is that? And that was around the Vivisect 6 era. You know, the cleanse, fold, and manipulate era was the end of where we were still trying to use everything analog, but tying in, say, an SB12 drum machine or something that wasn't quite the computer world yet. And so Vivisect 6 and everything on was what we wrote everything for the rest of Skinny Puppy, believe it or not, using the Atari 1040 ST and the Pro 24 program all the way up until the end of the process in 1994.
Kids have it so easy these days.
Yeah.
Cevin, how involved were you in and vice versa in Cevin the singer, Nivek? I don't know if you want me to call him Nivek or Cevin.
Well,
Kevin's vocal.
Kevin.
Yeah,
both
Cevin.
named Kevin. We thought, like, how stupid to be in a band with two guys named Kevin. So that was the original incentive to change our names around and just be Nivek and Kevin with a C. Just
I love the names. The names were genius. I think the names were a major part of the appeal that you guys had to me. And I used to say 7 key because I thought
I think I did a promo for Amstel beer once where I said that because people were calling me that, and I thought, like, oh no, I just was kidding.
So I'm not the only one. That's good.
So now if someone approaches me, like they're walking like somewhere, they'll be like, 7, I'll be like, run.
But how involved were you in, because obviously vocals are a big part of it, and the stage presence and lyrics and things like that. How involved were you in, like, the processing of the vocals, and how involved was Cevin in the music part of it? Did you guys stay out of each other's way and respect the boundaries? Was it super collaborative, or what was that like, the amalgamation of your production prowess and his his uniqueness as a singer?
I mean, and just to add to that, I mean, the thing about Skinny Puppy that always, like, shook me was just how dissonant and strange the vocals sounded to me. And the processing of it was just incredible. It took me years to figure out how anything like that was possible.
So, of course, at first, I was experienced with recording from being in the Images in Vogue band, and so being a recording engineer, not like a recording engineer, but a 4-track Porta Studio engineer. The first thing that I thought that inspired actually Skinny Puppy also in a great way that I didn't mention yet was the discovery of the Lexicon PCM41 digital delay. The first time that I ever heard that delay, I thought, like, okay, here we go, spaceship land. And I thought, like, this is something that I immediately didn't understand, how, everything I put through it seemed to sound so much better. So at first I was a little bit kind of heavy on the PCM41 effects. And so that went hand in hand with the first recordings of Skinny Puppy being heavy on, the effects of the hold delay and, like, pitch down and all sorts of things. And that continued through the Remission EP. And then I think that there came a certain time where Ogre obviously had, already a vision of where he saw it going. And then I felt like at one time I got the message that, hey, you're applying too many effects to his vocals liberally. He should be the one at this point to become that person. And then if you look early on in some of the earliest shows, say for instance, Ain't It Dead Yet, the film from '87.
I love that one, man.
Ogre has a stand-up PCM 41 on a stand that he is actually controlling all of his vocal effects.
Yeah.
So also at that point, you know, Dave Ogilvy, aka Rave, was also hugely instrumental in really sort of formulating the marriage between the music and the recording of the vocals. And then so I found at a point when you do have, as you say, like it kind of did at that point stay in two separate worlds. Okay, there's a musical world, and then there is a performance world that is recording the you know, his performance. And that was something that him and Rave used to get into that I had huge respect for. So you just leave it alone. You let them do what they're going to do, and then you hear the end results. The one thing that I didn't expect when I started the band was how much stage presence and how much idealism Ogre had as far as where he was going to take the live performance. I had no idea that was coming. And so luckily, you know, we had these friends that were super, super, super hyped on us starting to play live. And they built us this monstrosity of a stage for our first show. And I think that, you know, that really set the standard for, you know, what would become Skinny Puppy, because right from day one, the first show, we had a look, I think it's in our Smothered Hope video. You can go and see that also on YouTube. You can see that the look was already kind of like quite developed, and his stage presence was already pretty solid. And once I saw that, and we did our first tour in 85, and I saw the shows that were coming, I just realized that I was being witness to something that, you know, I don't know how to explain what he did or how he did it, but you know, I'm super happy that, you know, we have our very unique approach to music, but he has this very unique approach to performance.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered a question that I really wanted to ask you today about how the whole live performance kind of came together, but it seemed that your live shows really set you guys apart. The entire kind of smoke and mirrors and the theatrics of it all in the show was influential and shocking in a lot of ways as well. And I always just kind of wondered, I mean, I guess you said that Ogre kind of, you know, brought it to the table and you unsuspectingly, you know, just received it. But in terms of like the tours and the way that each tour had its own kind of unique stage setup, was that at all any kind of collaborative effort, or did you have friends that were like maybe into production that would just bring ideas to the table for every individual show, or how was that executed?
Well, Ogre definitely designed those shows. Last
Okay.
Rites, Too Dark Park, the shows that had the big production. He made sure that he, with the help of our tech friends, could gain access to people that would then give him options, and then he would basically go with his options. So for us, for myself and Dwayne, our goal was to try and to create something live visually for the instrumentation that would be equally as exciting or equally as interesting. So I started getting into, even though I was the keyboard player and I was programming as much as Dwayne, basically live, I thought like, okay, I'm going to go back to my drumming roots, and I'm going to build this gargantuous monstrosity that will have trash cans and garbage lids and all that sort of stuff. And also the idea I was talking about earlier, where I took like four car stereos, and I would when we go to a city, I'd tune it into their local radio, and I would have pads that could trigger sort of like radio stations, so that I could do a fill that could be like, well, I would never know what it would be. It could be like Bon Jovi, or it could be, as again, talk radio or British metal. It was that random. I could be playing the song and then do a fill. It would be like, and stuff like that became kind of like, you know, for us, the most exciting part is what can we do? So Dwayne developed a situation where he could trigger video and audio before we, technically the world was thinking about those things. We built these racks for that purpose too, that I still have, which is kind of cool if you look back in time. So to answer your question, everybody that ever worked with us, whether it be a visual film, visual person or somebody like that, they've always brought their art into it, but always have had been sort of like well directed by Ogre, and or if it was musical, by me or Dwayne.
I remember, I was born in 81, so you guys were well on your way when I was still in my diapers. But discovering Skinny Puppy for me in about 94, I remember being introduced into your live shows from the Ain't It Dead Yet VHS tapes. And it's funny, my path into discovering industrial music kind of came through the mainstream and seeing what was being fed to me through Headbangers Ball on MTV and stuff like that. I didn't have a wealth of access to learn about its roots. So I kind of started backwards, being what was thrown at me in frontwards, and then kind of moving my way back and learning about its history. And it's interesting that after watching that, I pick up so many visual cues of how you guys inspired so many live acts and bands, and what they've taken from you guys and kind of inspired you. I mean, you instantly watch, Skinny Puppy play live, and you can see elements of Marilyn Manson, you can see elements of Nine Inch Nails, you can see all these things. And what's that like for you in retrospect to look back and see how what you guys have done have influenced so many people over the years? I mean, is that something weird and kind of disassociated? Do you even like consider it, or?
I think Chris really wanted to ask this question, Mo. You stole his thunder.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I could see from Chris's facial expression.
I'm curious about the answer.
One of the most interesting things to witness throughout all this was in 1988, we had 2 or 3 different bands opening for us on a tour. I don't know why they were changing them out, but I came into one city, and a band called Nine Inch Nails was the band to open for us for the next several shows. But they didn't have an album out yet, and I think that they were brought on by the name or some sort of, I don't know how that happened, but so I was witness to what I hear is like one of their first shows, and being able at that point to sort of watch it grow, if you can imagine, show by show, and see sort of Trent and this whole thing build. And then, I mean, obviously since that day, to see the growth and development of Nine Inch Nails, I mean, has been quite amazing. I mean, it's just unbelievable in a lot of ways too. At certain times I remember meeting Al Jorgensen, and he was like giving me a demo cassette of I think was the Land of Rape and Honey. And he was he I remember that it just was really the beginnings of like this entire scene. And so to see the scene grow in the way that it has been, it surprises me. I never thought that this would happen, to be honest with you. I never thought it would grow.
Did you identify with and I was trying to avoid using the genre industrial. Did you identify with that scene, with the artists on that scene? Were you tight with certain artists? Did it feel collaborative, or did it feel combative and territorial and negative, or was it positive?
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely positive. I don't know. I had a good amount of feeling of support from people. Oddly, Ogre and I also worked at Expo 86 in Vancouver, where we worked behind the scenes on the theater. And the theater didn't want to do something that was just totally typical, representing each country when it was like an international theater. So I said, what can we do that would be just over the top? And I said, bring Einstürzende Neubauten to represent Germany. Yeah. And so I thought you kind of said that as like, not too serious, but it was taken seriously. And so we went into developing quite a, well, basically a recording, a live show, and the development of that live show in Vancouver with them. And afterwards, we assumed that we would possibly get fired for what would happen, because they came out and set fire to the stage right away. And there was maybe 2,000 people waiting, and half the people ran out, and it was replaced quickly by the empty seats. It was an outdoor venue. So I have to say, to this day, I don't think I've ever seen or heard anything as crazily intense as that.
Mm.
And afterwards, they didn't fire us. So they said, what else should we do? And I said, bring test department to represent the UK.
That's awesome.
So they brought test department over, and it's actually on my YouTube. There's a clip from it there, but they had like $100,000 budget to build a stage, and again, record an EP, do all the visuals. It was fully produced. It took over a month to produce, I think, in Vancouver. They built all the instruments. We helped just orchestrate this entire pageant. Basically, it was the Ministry of Power, featured a 40-piece orchestra, fire jugglers, like trapeze artists, and people that represent every miners' union in the entire country. And then so we did it on the UK day for Expo. So that day, Charles and Diana were there on the site on another stage, and the Queen's band marched from one end of the site, which was 7 miles, to the other end. And following right behind them was test department with the miners with their flags and burning poles. And then they just veered off at one point and went down onto the stage and performed this set that I think to this day, like, participating in events like that has been more inspiring than really anything. And so soon thereafter, we found ourselves in Europe, and then I had met like people like Stephen Malander from Cabaret Voltaire, and had like met like Genesis Fjord, and like people that I thought like I'd never have a relationship with. We opened for Nick Cave, and I was all of a sudden thinking friends of Blixa, and it just was like this really strange feeling of being welcomed. And so I think that gave a bit of a power to how we continued. It kind of felt like we had like this again, like a camaraderie, like the Wild Planet scene, but now with like what was considered and determined at that point as being like the new school of industrial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cevin, I remember, and Mo, you touched on this, like for me, when I heard about Skinny Puppy, before I even actually, when I was also listening to the music, it was always chatter about how incredible the live shows were. How important, and I guess it was pretty important, quite evident from everything that you've been saying up till now, like the performance art. Did you guys view yourselves as performance artists? Did that start to overshadow how people viewed you as far as producers and musicians? Like, did you start to consciously or unconsciously create music for the performance, as opposed to just creating good music for the records for people to listen to?
Yeah, I mean, so we made the music that came to us. Obviously, I don't think we ever could write that for a show, because we never knew where Ogre would take the show. But what was interesting is that at an early state, again, right in our infancy, that same crew that I just said I'd worked with Expo 86, were also an incredibly theatrical sort of group. Like, they were based in sort of like local theater groups, and many organizations that had seen a couple of our shows. And so right away, I remember having a meeting with a few of these people from what was known as the Tamanous Theater, and a guy named Morris Panich and Myra Davies were extremely helpful in sort of like training us, like what has kind of been done up to this point, and where we're tying in with performance, and how how the performance could be taken to a level that could be considered our own and could be seen as like a valid performance art statement. So with that, it wasn't like an intention to stamp ourselves in performance art. There was an attempt to recognize and embrace how we were being recognized. But I think there was a natural flow already. I think that when people from the theater groups start to come to you and question, wow, how is it that you're conceiving this energy? You should try and still roll on a bit of that energy that's happening. And I'm sure that Ogre had a vision about where, he had wanted to take this all along. And then as I said earlier, as soon as Dwayne and I saw where it was headed, it sort of became easier to try and fit in with fit in within the framework. We started doing things like putting digital delays up on stands above our keyboard so that people could see us twisting the knobs of our effects. And so it sort of became a bit of a performance in that sense.
Thinking about the likes of Nine Inch Nails and other groups, has it always been for you like when you see their performances, oh, we inspired them, or has it always also been a little bit like, wow, we're getting copied, like blatantly copied here?
Blatantly.
Well,
blatantly copied.
I think Mo can attribute to the fact that Manson definitely took one of Ogre's stage ideas where, Ogre did this idea in, I think it was like 1991, where he had the painter's stilts and hydraulic arms. And he was also tethered. And so at points he'd be walking along as a spider, and then he'd be hauled right up to the ceiling of the venue and be performing half the song with these stilts from the top of the venue, which was just an incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it was so incredibly intense. So I know for sure that Manson directly took that from Ogre. There's a thing where there was a tour where Ogre did this thing where he performed half the set in mud, and what's so uncanny is that the Woodstock Nine Inch Nails performance, I swear Trent is just straight up in Ogreland. But the thing is that we all borrow something out of each other. We all borrow influences and inspirations and stuff like that. So to say, hey, that's us or whatever, I'm not that type of person. Think like, well, borrow it but take it to a new level. That's probably the best way to be in that sense.
I've read the concept behind Skinny Puppy is to create this style of music that sounds like it's coming from like a dog that's had its tail trampled on. Was your intention, you and Ogre, to scare the audience into submission? And did Ogre ever cross the line with the performances? Like, did you ever have to reel him back in? Was he, how extreme? Because everything that I was hearing, and then when I saw the show and stuff, it was pretty wild compared to other performances from other artists around the same time that I was seeing. You guys were pretty out there and really pushing the envelope. And how far was it being pushed before it started to cause a strain on your creative partnership? Maybe, perhaps.
Well, I think that we were doing things at one point that I'll call it the assassination sequences, where it would look like somebody got up from the audience with a gun and was ready to kill Ogre for what he was saying. Mm-hmm. And that was extremely scary. Quite often I don't know why, but the security wasn't really told what we were going to do. And so quite often you would get these results that you couldn't expect. On a different tour, we had a guy came out of the audience with a beer and a beer bottle, and it was a breakaway bottle, but it would be full of stage blood, and he would be coming up like he's a drunk guy and then be giving Ogre the finger, and then he turned the bottle around and just bottle smash his face, and it just looked so, it was too real. Yeah. His face later would be just totally covered with this blood, and he'd still keep on performing, but he was acting as though he was like seriously hurt. And so we could never really tell sometimes there was a period in around 1986 when we did a 72 show tour of the world tour without stopping. And certain things started happening on that tour where the use of props and stuff like that got super, super risky and super violent. Like he would have a giant metal face of this thing that was all like, it would kind of look like it was metal pieces that were all put together, which they were. And he would throw it down on the ground and then leap up into the air and land on this thing on his back. And I thought, like, you know, I mean, Ogre has always been like so devoted to the things that he
commitment
that he does that, you know, I really didn't want to ever say, you know, infringe upon, you know, what he did and how he did it, because his performances were always, I don't know, I don't think you could ever say that he didn't put 100%.
Yeah.
So, you know, the shows didn't really affect, you know, us and our creativity as far as that was concerned. If anything, it gave us excitement to think about what, after we made a song, what it could potentially, how it could be potentially performed.
I mean, there's a lot of, I'm sorry, David, go.
I just want curious, like, where did all these wild stage show ideas come from for it? Like, what were the inspiration?
It was a cross between, I guess, the connection with the theater groups of you know, our original, as I said, when we worked at Expo, Myra Davies was this lady that really helped us steer, I think, ourselves into celebrating like that performance art as much as the music. And really, I think that, you know, ever since the beginning, I think Ogre's had like a really conceptual idea about if he's going to tour, it's going to be a concept.
I mean, everything wasn't just for theatrics. I mean, there was also some deep meaning behind it as well, especially like his stance against you know, animal cruelty. Like I heard a story, I heard a story that he was like standing in front of a TV and was like eating a cheeseburger and then vomiting, you know.
Also, he would do things like pre-prepare props, and a lot of he'd have a cheeseburger from McDonald's and open it up, but it would just spew guts out of it, you know, things like that. He would make the point earlier on, you know, we were heavily talking about animal rights for a tour, and so we had a anti-vivisection setting, and it got a little too real looking. He had a prop dog that looked way too real. It had like you know, appliances that would move and everything, and it looked way too real. And so the police were called on one show, and they came in and they're like, okay, you're under arrest, where's the dog? And we showed them the dog, it was prop. They're like, nope, that's it, you're good, you're done. And they're like, you don't understand, they're sticking up, shut up, they're going to jail. So right away, I think that the cause right there started getting it was nice that the cause got out, but you know, the show was intense in the sense that, you know, sometimes we have to have our eyes open by seeing something, and it's, you know, it's a little bit, you know, we have played with that concept as well, exposing people to things that you might not like in order to have a new understanding.
Yeah, I was wondering how important the concept of animal rights were in your group, and if you were all on board from the beginning on in the same way, and also I'm wondering, how did you come about with the name Skinny Puppy at all? Like, was that already somehow based into, we want to like fight for animal rights?
We all love animals, and I think I have an overboard love for animals. And so the name Skinny Puppy came because while I was on the road with Images in Vogue, one of my bandmates caught me talking to a dog at a truck stop. And I was, in fact, asking the dog if he was a skinny puppy. And I was kind of saying it in this funny voice that I can make. Are you a skinny puppy? You know, when you talk to an animal, you're talking a different voice. So my friend went back on the bus. He said, you should have heard this wacko over there talking to the dog, asking if it was a skinny puppy. he said, say it, say what you were saying. And why? He said, are you a skinny puppy? And so I kind of got, yeah, that followed me for a little while. And then, so I don't know where along the way I started thinking that if I ever start a band, that's going to be the name of the band. So the concept being life as seen through a dog's eyes. You know, a dog doesn't have an ability to speak up, but they can just bark really loud. So, you know, that was really the concept of the form of any type of music could come from it.
And was that immediately shared by Augur and everyone else in the band?
Well, we did have an immediate discussion that night at the party about the concept of Skinny Puppy, and I explained to him, you know, the concept of it. And so the first song, Canine, is actually in fact based on that concept. From that point on, he took the lyrics to you know, a different, not any song I don't think after that was based on dogs.
I just read this random fact that has nothing to do with the animals and stuff, but it says that your music was used as torture at Guantanamo Bay,
Yeah,
and you guys sent an invoice for $666,000
to the Pentagon.
So we were contacted by a group of guards that had left Guantanamo Center, and I guess they had witnessed things there that they didn't find appropriate. And not only did they not find appropriate in the sense of using music as torture, but they wanted to alert the bands that the music that they were using. And so they were using 3 of our songs, or maybe more, but playing it at like deafening, ear-splitting levels. And I heard that, you know, put with earphones at like, you know, 125 decibels.
Oh shit.
So we were mortified by that, and immediately with the help of those people that were writing the book about it, I think his name's Terry Roberts, basically we felt it appropriate to invoice them for their wrong. And of course they never responded, and that's just more, you know, it's kind of like the typical world of that world. You know, you would never expect that to happen, but at the same time you also expect that they'll never take responsibility.
Wow, that's crazy.
Fuck them.
Kevin, was your management at the time, and were venue owners and promoters, were they pushing you guys to keep exploring the performance side and keep pushing it into more extreme territory? Was everybody on board and kind of egging you guys on to the point where maybe you started to feel like it was overshadowing the music and it was going over the line or whatever, or was it quite respectful?
Yeah, we've never been pushed by anybody to do anything but what we naturally do. So it's always been quite fun. I mean, you know, our last tour was in 2017 in Europe, and you know, we don't do the scale of the shows that we used to do, mainly because of the, you know, the like the sheer, I don't know, you don't want to have a semi truck basically, you know, of stuff. It's you know, you don't want to get away from that. So it's become a little bit less is more. So I think the venues, when you're in a band like us, probably a band like Guar or something like that, you show up and the stage will be covered with a substance that they protect themselves ahead of time. And you know, quite often now we're nowhere near as messy as we used to be anyways.
But how hard was it to have that performance be like this expectation, and how hard was it like to replicate that night after night, to get out there in the costumes and the makeup and the stage design, and then afterwards you got to get it all off, and maybe there's after parties and people hanging on the tour
Ali's
bus.
usually interested in the after parties, right?
Yeah,
No,
always.
we haven't really been, strangely, you know, we weren't really too after party-ish, you know. It's like when you do something like that, like it's more about like the crew, the friendship we made with the crew, just hanging with friends, and like, watching, a video or something, or so chill afterwards. People probably thought, God, they must be out like eating flesh and bones everywhere. And in fact, we'd be sitting there like smoking a joint, sitting back, just chilling. So yeah, it's actually been, it's quite chill.
I read that book. It was called Assimilate, A Critical History of Industrial Music. Are you familiar? I'm sure you are familiar with it.
Yes.
To read this. Is it a good book, Mo?
Yeah, it's great. But there was a statement in it that actually said that they were talking about feminist Gothic music, and that how Skinny Puppy played such a huge role in bringing a large female crowd to most shows. That your guys' band is actually what brought such a huge female crowd, and then by presence also brought so many more female artists to making industrial music as well. Was that something that you noticed as well?
We've always supported everybody making everything. So if we could support a female-based band and a male-based band, it didn't matter. We've quite often had, bands with female front singers as our opening act, just to show that equal platform is always been our thought and our goal.
It just was it was an interesting article that just how you guys really played a huge role into bringing more females into the scene.
Yeah, I think it's important to inspire and encourage everyone, regardless of your race or your sex.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Was there ever any crossover with your music? Like, let's say at raves or clubs where it was predominantly electronic music, like, I don't know, techno music or anything like that? Did you perform at any of those types of shows back in the days?
Dwayne became, as soon as Dwayne heard the techno scene in '93, he changed overnight. He heard Asen, and that was it. It was like changed him completely. So our album, The Process, was really difficult to that was our most biggest challenge, because we were kind of like meeting the headbutt between what at the time was like, say, becoming guitar-based electronic music, and then the more rave culture-based techno music that Dwayne was enamored by. So our demos were this huge cross section between something that could have gone on in the rave culture all the way to metal. And so there's obviously we were challenged along the way with cultural musical cultural stimulus, not knowing which road to take. So luckily, most of the places that we were ever booked to play and stuff like that seemed to there was sometimes in Europe where we were booked with like, say, Kraftwerk, or in other places we were booked with Cradle of Filth. I mean, the difference between a booking like that is just immense. It's like the difference between the other bands on the bill can really be good or bad. I remember not feeling like we're at the right venue sometimes, or the right situation, but oddly that just makes you play harder in some weird way. We were playing in Barcelona at the festival a couple of years ago, playing with the Damned. So Skinny Puppy and the Damned, but we play after the Damned, and it's like, you just had this raucous, like, punk, amazing punk set, and then we came on and thought, okay, let's see what happens with this. And so that actually is fun. But then you have a situation like in Sweden once, we put on a double bill, believe it or not, with Europe. So, okay, can you imagine the final countdown and Skinny Puppy on the same bill? So that was considerably a lot more challenging.
We talked about this in the past. You've mentioned how Dwayne was kind of introduced into the rave scene in LA in the early '90s. Did he ever drag you out to any of the parties, or did you just, like, from a distance watch his theatrics?
Well, luckily he exposed me at that time right to the most proper stuff. And so I was always a fan as well. But
Yeah.
Dwayne was all the way. Like, I mean, like wearing Ren and Stimpy underwear on the outside of his pants and a purple cape. I mean, he literally like became rave culture for the last 2 years of his life.
Oh man, I wish I could have saw that.
It was beautiful, you know, and so we had a lot of raves up in Vancouver too. And after we made our album in LA, and I must say that, you know, this is when we'd signed to a new label, and then the label started trying to playing with us a bit, well, more than a bit. Like they kind of disallowed us to work with our regular production. They kind of just got into, you know, giving too many comments, and this was based around like a Rick Rubin. So, you know, the whole concept of the recording went kind of haywire. And so when we returned back to Canada, it was awesome because we were able to form our own studio, and Dwayne really was the beginning and formed the beginning of Subconscious Communications, which was really the beginning of where I'd then be able to branch out with a band called Download after that. And we could express more of our, you know, more dark techno idealisms that would never work with Skinny Puppy. So luckily that was an outlet that, you know, was like bursting at the seams, at least for Dwayne, for sure. But
was that like what the Doubting Thomas stuff was that you did on Wax Tracks? Was that?
So Doubting Thomas was in 1990 and 89, 1990.
Okay, so
and
that was...
so that was still in the Skinny Puppy was in its heyday. But, you know, inevitably when you write a lot of demos and stuff like that, we were coming up with songs at that time that we thought like, well, what's this? This is not suitable for Skinny Puppy. And it wasn't suitable for Tiergarten either. So it was like, we were kind of questioning, well, what is this? And then before too long, we had enough material to make the album The Infidel. And we went in, and Wax Tracks immediately said, okay, I'm interested, and put the impetus behind us making that. But they also signed us to do a collaboration with Bill Lieb from Frontline Assembly and Blixa from Neubauten called Cyberactive. And that was also on Wax Tracks. And yeah, so that was a period of where Ogre was like pretty heavily involved with Revolting Cocks and Ministry. And so we were kind of like going, I could feel us, you know, spacing out, panning out, and more things were happening. Ogre eventually got involved with Pigface, and sort of like, I think the duet with Trent that he did on that became quite well known. And so we could see the culture was like starting to really become an icon. And we were
was it all the side projects that was driving you guys apart? You were really prolific in the early to mid 90s with, I mean, there's Download, Tiergarten, Plateau, Doubting Thomas, Cyberactive, Hilt. I'm not sure the exact timeline of all this stuff, but I'm trying to understand the reasons why, because I kind of know this because I was in a duo situation before, and I know it can be a nightmare because you have this compromised vision, and after a while you stop wanting to compromise. You start arguing more and trying to assert your creative position and perspective on things. Was it all the side projects that you guys were involved in that was driving both of you away from Skinny Puppy?
I mean, certainly there was a period where we always felt that, well, I wonder what's going to happen as a result of, say, for instance, Ogre's involvement with Ministry or Revolting Cocks. I thought like, well, you know, I wonder what's going to happen with this. And in some ways, it did put a split in some ways on some things. But in another way, I thought it was very healthy that we maintained our ability to say, this is a pure idea that I want to present to Ogre. And I don't want to give him like another cassette that I know that the ideas are not right. But at the same time, I would have other friends that would gravitate to liking, say, certain ideas. Mm-hmm. And so that's what would become the impetus for wanting to, say, develop even the Tiergarten. As I said, it was like a thing where, originally it wasn't intentional, but later if we came up with a song or even ever since. If I come up with a song that's kind of directioned in that way, I kind of know it right away. So, oh, here's one for Edward, or here's one for Download. I mean, Download continued all the way up until last year. Well, actually now 2019, and Phil Western passed away February, and so that continued for 25 years. And so I find that once I make a connection with somebody in some sort of level, that it creates a unity of a group. You know, it's like, you know, going like you guys here, the beers and DJs group. It creates a group, and so you look forward to the time you spend in collaborating. And so Ogre has as his side projects Ogre, and he's done other things as well. But I think it's healthy. I think it just brings a purity to what we're doing. But then as well, I should say, as we grow older, you know, I'm almost 60. There comes a time when what becomes now important is you know, being able to just actually express yourself still. You know, it used to be that I found myself expressing myself with a desire for a goal. Like, it used to be, okay, I want to have a dance song, I want to have this. Now, I don't know about you guys, I make music, I just want to see what the instruments will do. It's like, I don't even care where it ends up. And be quite honest, I don't care if I end up finishing it or releasing it. But you know, I just made a new album now. That's I guess it's my third or fourth solo album. And so each solo album is kind of based upon, for me, like what we were talking about earlier, about having music that somehow is attractive to you by some form of happy accident or something that would happen that you feel that you can't really attribute completely to yourself. So you know, now the values of making music is not about a relationship, it's about like the ability.
The solo project is like the Brap and Forth projects that you have, right?
Actually, the Back and Forth projects that were originally outtakes from Skinny Puppy Sessions.
Okay.
The last Brap and Forth volume 7 and 8 was songs that I wrote, say, between 1981 to 1984, that were like the very beginnings, even before it went on to, like, there's songs that were like left out of, say, the first Back and Forth tape. And so that was like a retro album. But this album now, the album's going to be called Resonance. It was called X-Way, but actually I got into a situation where I feel that I wanted to change the name of the album. It's a long story. I won't get too heavily into the detail on that, but the album is called Resonance. And so basically, this is all modern stuff that I made between the last 2 years. And it also features collaborations with Edward Caspell on it, and Chris Corner from IMX, Soraya, and also my, you know, good friends. Just like I'll jam with my friend Dre, and he'll help me to be like, sort of like lay a framework for what will be, you know, the original inspiration. And then if I hear that happy accent or something in it, I'll go back and then I'll start working on it. But so it's great to have a person there always with me to be like, yeah, let's just jam. And that's sort of like, that'll be the impetus for starting a song usually.
Wow. Cevin, I'm curious, and I hate to backtrack now that we're talking about the stuff that you're working on these days, but I'm curious about the Rick Rubin Deaf American pitch. Like, what was it, and was it Rick himself that convinced you guys to your contract was finished with Network? I assume that was a great collaboration with a Vancouver-based label that you guys started with. They became quite big. I remember at the time they had Sarah McLachlan on there, which they had quite a bit of success with. Chris was managed by Neil, they turned into a management. They morphed into a management company, right, Chris? And
yeah, wasn't it Coldplay on there too?
Huh?
Coldplay was on there too, the early album.
Yeah,
right? First album. Yeah.
So this chapter of your lives, your creative partnership with Network Records ended, or was ending, and here comes Rick Rubin, and he gives you the pitch. What was that? What was it that he said that? And maybe I don't know if Wax
Honestly,
Tracks,
if I could go
like,
back,
also wanted to sign you guys? Or
we got offered deals to continue on with Capitol on our own, which I would have really liked to do because we were with them for like 9 years and they're a fantastic label.
Yeah.
Network, yeah, as you said, they, oddly, they had discovered Sarah McLachlan as one of our catering girls when we were on a show. She passed over a cassette.
Wow.
And so they had huge success with her. And basically that formed the face of the label from that point on. Network dropped the underground stuff at that point, and
Yeah.
I think they were
No more
happy.
Severed Heads with Sarah McLachlan.
Yeah, Severed Heads and Sarah McLachlan. So yeah, so they were happy to see. I remember them sort of saying, "Oh well, this is great for you guys that you guys can now go do the deal, go get the deal that you've always wanted and stuff." And sadly, so I remember being flown to LA and put in the big conference room, and then it was like the first thing that was said is, "Well, we don't like your producer. He's not a million-selling producer, and we want you to consider Brian Eno, Adrian Sherwood." And we're like, look at each other like, what? How are we going to deal with this? And so I think that was like, if I could go back now, I would have just been adamant as hell and said, no, 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 no. But for some reason, being under the youthful pressure and stupidity, we let that pressure sort of like influence like the possibilities of our direction. So I remember being on the phone with Dave Ogilvy and saying, well, this is what they want to do. And what I'd like you to do is just join the band as a band member and come in and see how this goes. See what's going to happen. He said, absolutely not. This is my album. I'm out of here. And he was angry. And I thought like, oh, fuck, this is the last thing that I wanted to happen. I actually thought, from this point on, this is going to be a huge, huge, huge challenge. So in fact, we went down without him. And that was also the biggest mistake ever. And tried to make an album in a situation in a house. That's another mistake. Everybody living in the same house. And it was horrible. It was like we had a great studio set up and everything like that. But, for some reason, the productivity didn't roll. And then all of a sudden we started getting chastised by the label. Like, they'd be like, here's your report card for the week. And if we did present them with a song, they'd be like, well, I don't think this song can be played on piano or guitar. So therefore, I don't think it's really a song.
Yeah.
So that's like the second thing that a record company will say to you when you're in the wrong setting.
Yeah.
And so from there, I kind of had to tell them. I went over to Mark Geiger's house and said, hey, this isn't working out. We gotta just abandon ship and take it back to Vancouver and see what happens. And he said, okay. So went back, and before too long, I had them apologize to Rave, like basically reach out and apologize for what they did. And we were able to bring him back in. We brought him back in, and me and Dwayne and him we completely reworked the entire album and basically redid it. And we're mixing up at Brian Adams' house. And it was like this weird thing going on still, but it was coming together. And then all of a sudden, American Recordings, AKA Rick Rubin, pulled the budget from us and said, nope, we want you to stop working on the album. And we're like, what the hell are you guys doing? And so what they wanted to do is they wanted to get out of the contract. And what they were going to do was just, by way of a bunch of shitty things happened that I won't go into detail on, but nevertheless, shortly thereafter, I'll say a month after, Dwayne died of an OD.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
At that point, I was like, this is insane. So Rave and I got together and we said, we're going to finish this album and we're just going to send it to them. I don't even know why we did it, actually. I wish I didn't. I wish we just kept our ideas for ourselves. But we were bound and determined to finish the album for Dwayne. So went into the studio, and the SSL still the flying faders going where Dwayne was. All of his moves were still there. It was one of the creepiest things ever.
Wow.
We finished the album, turned it in, and then the next thing you know, we were dropped from our contract. And they released the album, but it was it was released with such bitterness, such a heavy coat of bitterness thing from that point on. And so that at that point, the band split up. And we, you know, I thought like we split up pretty much forever, and had no intention of reforming the band at all. And
was this your first album now without Ogre?
oh no, we've never done a Skinny Puppy album without Ogre.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Process was released. This was released, actually, we started it in 1993. We finished it and released it in 1996.
Okay.
It came out, the band was finished. There was no discussion or talk on Skinny Puppy until some guys in Germany that were making a big festival called the Doomsday Festival.
In Dresden.
Yeah, in Dresden, yes. Offered us a fairly large amount of money to consider reforming to make a show. So I remember I hadn't seen Ogre in 5 years. So I thought like, oh, wow, that's weird. I didn't expect him to say that. And so the ball rolled, and we were able to develop a show that was almost on par with one of the Too Dark films, doing all our visuals. We had Thomas Kuntz build a robot in place of Dwayne. We had like just this crazy amount of stuff that was quite amazing. A lot of rehearsal went in it, and believe it or not, it was just Ogre and I on the stage. And Ogre decided that on that show that he was going to taunt the audience with, like, as you guys have said before, there's been a lot of people that have come along which you think they've seen the inspiration from. So he would bring out fake ogres, and that these people would come out, even though Ogre would be singing backstage, these people would come out and mime, pretend that they're doing it, and then some person would come out and shoot them or something like that, blow them up. So it was like, I didn't know what Ogre was going to do in the show. I'm here sitting here playing my big drums and my synth kit and wondering what is happening. And then before, it was the fifth song that I'm in, the audience was extremely large too, I have to say. Fifth song, being alone on the stage, that finally Ogre entered and the audience just lost it. And so there was such a good camaraderie from that show that we decided to reform. And, you know, since then we have gone through all the rigors once again of being signed and making several albums and touring, you know, multiple times again. Luckily, the tours, since we reformed and everything, have been a little bit safer in some ways and a little bit more profitable than the past. I don't remember any of the tours of the past, in the old days, being like where we actually came home with like money. It's like some weirdest thing. Be like, I got a per diem, I think, yeah.
Cevin, you mentioned Adrian Sherwood, and I'm a massive dub fan. I think it informs everything that I do to this day. I was wondering, and I noticed the dreadlocks. I was wondering how influential dub music and some of the really trippy stuff influenced your work, whether it's Skinny Puppy or all of the side projects. I especially think of, there's a song that you guys did, I can't remember which album, Stairs and Flowers. It always appealed to me. It was quite dubby and trippy. Like, I always felt like you had encapsulated some aspects of the dub aesthetic in your music. And I was curious about that.
So working with Adrian Sherwood in 1988 was one of the most inspiring things I ever did, I think. We worked on two remixes at Chicago Track Studios, and over a period of 3 days, and Adrian practically did not stop the whole time. So being able to break down and see his procedure of how he works was hugely inspirational. So what he does is he builds a series of click tracks that become the source of his trigger, and he would use the AMS delay and basically sample samples on both sides of the AMS delay and send triggers to either side from sends on the board manually. So And he carried a reel-to-reel tape with him that most of it was like a collection of stuff. But the discussion got pretty heavy into Lee Scratch Perry.
Mhm.
And Adrian was hugely inspired by his experience in Jamaica with Lee Scratch Perry. And you could see how it was being attributed to his own work. So at that time, I had also just started going to Jamaica myself. And it was kind of like conferring on the inspiration of Jamaican music on me directly, which at around the time of Vivisect 6, it was like I became addicted to wanting to see and more and learn about Jamaica. So spent the better part of 20 years going there yearly and making more friends in each time. And then inevitably by, the entire experience, sort of realizing how much of a role it had in inspiration. So, everything is like it's so noticeable critically in inspiration when you let it in. Dance hall, and then the sessions with Adrian, and then thus dub music. It's the weirdest thing ever is like being exposed to dub music at first, and then here in LA, it's crazy that the world's most famous reggae artists all live in LA. It's like Scientist is a regular guy at the dub club, and so I noticed that Scientist was mixing, and I'd be like, holy shit, Scientist is mixing Michael Prophet tonight with like U-Roy's band, and it's like something you wouldn't even been able to see in Jamaica. Yeah. So it's like all of a sudden I realized that you had hands-on access to this. We became friends with Scientist. And so the first time Scientist came over to my studio, I thought like, wow, I think I might be the most fanboy ever from this visit to my studio. It was like the most intimidating for sure, thinking, what's he gonna say about my console? What's he gonna say about this and shit? But I have a Mackie console, a 32x8, and he was like, that's a great board, man. It's like, there's nothing wrong with that board. There's absolutely nothing wrong. People say it, blah. So it was like instantly sort of like professing that, okay, that's okay. But you see those NS10s you got up there? Out. I never want you to use those speakers again.
Really? No NS10s?
No NS10s. And then so I've learned now that the Adrian Sherwood style of mixing and also the Scientist style is they use the Uri, sorry about the sun, the Uri 813s or something of that size to actually mix on the whole time.
So this is amazing. Yeah. This is amazing because I met Adrian when he was in DC doing a Tackhead show at the old 930 Club. And I think I must have been like 17 at the time. And in 2014, I was doing a live show in Amsterdam, kind of doing a test show, and I was able to put together the lineup. And one of the people that was on my dream lineup was Adrian Sherwood. So I put him on the lineup. We had a great time. We had dinner, and I was able to tell him just how much that show, when I was 17 and meeting him, whatever meant to me, over dinner all these years later. And this was a question that I think, because I'm having a fanboy moment right now, it was a question that I think I've been waiting 30 some years to ask you. So thank you. Thank you for answering.
I have to say is how like I'm just so thankful that I've had the ability to be able to have all the exchanges I've had with the people, as we say, our household names, like Adrian Sherwood, and it's really been something that like I mark all those experiences up to just, I mean, it's been kind of like a dream in a lot of ways. So I've always been tried to remain super humble as well about the whole thing, and try to just realize that all these experiences some way of like translating that into your own world and stuff like that is really been like a fun thing, not so much more an intimidating thing.
One thing that I've always appreciated about you, Cevin, is the fact that you've always kind of dived into everything that you were super interested in. I mean, just to give a few examples, with like this releasing, Euro rack modules with the subconscious, they were the old Plan B stuff that you guys kind of like reissued. And then, to tie into how Mew and I met, we met at a toy convention called Designer Con. And we were standing in line for Paul Kaiju, who is a kind of a, what would I say, really kind of a leader and an innovator in terms of designer toys, and it was interesting to see you there, somebody that I've always looked up to musically, and then also share a similar hobby as me that is quite rare. Not very many people are interested in general. And then now to see you kind of come full circle after doing Eurorack modules, also kind of designing your own toys as well and releasing your own stuff.
Cevin, before you answer, we had a show last week where we were already discussing about you being guest tonight, and we were like guessing of how much of the show is going to be talking about the designer toys. It took us quite a while, almost 2 hours, but go ahead.
So, as I was saying earlier to you guys before I think we went on, that this is like, it's, you have a vinyl addiction, and it got translated into a new form of vinyl. And one of my friends, Naive Estevan,
who's also one of my really, really close friends as well. Yeah.
Isn't he wonderful? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he can be very inspirational. He's like, Kenny, you got to see this man. He's like showing me all these toys. And I was like, what the hell is that? And then he said, you got to meet Paul Kaiju, man. That guy he's going to be your best friend. And then, so it's true. He introduced me to Paul Kaiju. And since then, Paul Kaiju has become one of my best friends. Yeah. And so we go to Japan together, and, just to watch him in his element, man, is amazing. But so somewhere along, this is where it goes into another story segue, but somewhere along the way, as a result of all the 20 years of going to Jamaica and not being like really like on top of like my skin, I must have really screwed my face up at one point. And I got a basal cell that was like the size of this part of my face here, and went into surgery that some people have seen the pictures, you can find them online, but they're horrific. And went through an experience where all I could think about at that point is they had me in a healing position where I couldn't do anything except just sit there for like probably 2 months and heal and sort of like get my mind together, because it was like, it's a pretty hardcore thing to have your face be disfigured. The first experience I had with that is I was walking down the street after, and a young girl looked at me and began to cry. And I thought like, man, I must look just horrible. So I went out for a while, and I had just, I got less attention if I wore, believe it or not, a handkerchief over my face. And so I was in this situation where all I could think about was Paul, and what Paul had said to me at one point about how he had made toys with the idea ahead of time of structure, and how, say, a leg fits to a body and an arm fits to a body, and how he did it. So I started thinking to myself, well, gee, I don't care how it really turns out. I guess I'm just going to take clay to hand right now, and I'm going to see how it turns out. So I made this creature called Basil, and based on basal cell. He's like,
do you have one near you can share with us, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Wow.
You see, I'm not really a sculptor, and this one comes with hairstyle that Rihanna's done.
Wow.
But so it's made of soft vinyl, and they're so you have to sculpt each part, like the arm and so on, like this. You got to sculpt each foot, and everything, and get into the detail and stuff. He's got his backpack, all this stuff. So originally I was like thinking, wow, this is a fantastic thing to be able to do while I'm down. And then before I knew it, people were assisting me to help me to get it to actually be made into a real toy. And that was very difficult. I sent it over to Japan, believe it or not. And it was in the factory to get the next step, which is wax molds. And then it goes to metal molds. Yeah. And the factory burned down. The building burned down, and my sculpt burnt with it. So it was lost. It was done, gone. And another company called Unbox Industries from Hong Kong basically heard about it and said, hey, if you've got photographs of that, we can reproduce, we can do it exactly, we can build it 3D design. And so they did that and printed it out and got it all done and then sent it back to the same factory, and then the factory was able to make it into the toy. So again, once with the help of everybody, it became this whole community based thing again, very much like the music community in that sense. And it's been such a pleasure to be a part of. You know, Mo, it's a great, those people are all such cool people.
I mean,
Kevin,
it's an underground community of its own, and it's strange because these things are so difficult to produce, and the process of making them is so hands-on that they're only produced in such a limited amount. So there's a greater demand for them than there are availability, so that there's these kind of lotteries, right, where you sign up and you put your name in a bowl, and only the people who are called who can get one or actually get one. So I remember Naiba Stefan told me he called it catching kaijus, and it's basically like when you get the blessing to create to actually have an opportunity to purchase one of these things, you're owning a piece of art that is someone created, that's really kind of individually for you. And
you know what's
it's
mind-boggling is like to be able to go to Japan and meet all those guys that make that stuff. Like
absolutely,
you just held up the I believe that's a Blowpuss figure, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
This one I got on a lottery too as well.
That right there is called a Beamon Kogai.
Yep.
And that is that so that's a rare piece, Mo.
I know, man. It's my treasured piece.
You know, at one point you probably could have seen it as low as 400, but I'm going to say that's probably worth $600 right now, at least.
At least.
Paul's introduced me to Blowpuss, and we've had a couple of great sushi dinners with him. You know, to meet the guy Shig who makes Nag Nag Nag, or any of these guys. It's just like the characters behind the art again is so amazing.
Kevin, you spent I read you spent in the late 70s, I believe. You spent quite a bit of time in Japan. So
who's that?
My new
what is
one.
that?
Oh, it's a new one.
I've just finished.
Wow.
Crazy.
That's incredible.
That looks amazing.
It's based on my cat.
Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't even see that. That's like if you don't really see it right away. Insane.
And it's a Siamese cat.
That's
so
awesome.
Kevin, was your love of kaiju, did it stem from your years spent in Japan in the late 70s? I read you learned how to speak Japanese as well. You were staying with a family and they didn't speak English, so you sort of by default had to learn how to speak Japanese. And do you go back every year? Is it a place that you look forward to going back to?
Yeah, I kind of found it to be amazing that the two places that I felt the most enamored with were both islands and both called Japan and Jamaica. I was like, what the hell? How can that be? And how can it be that the culture of both islands was just so something so attractive about each of them? Japan, my dad sent me to when I was 17 years old on a youth exchange trip. At first, it was like, I said, no, I can't believe you're going to do this to me, because I was listening to Genesis and smoking weed in my basement. So it was probably one of the greatest things he ever did to me. And, in those days, it was the Showa era, which is a completely different era to what it is now in Japan. So it's much, much, much more strict.
Wait a minute, that was 79?
78.
78. So like, I mean, Japan was pretty much closed down at that point still, like not many foreigners there, right?
Well, where we were staying, you would never see another gaijin, aka foreigner, wandering around. And so when people would see us, especially on being tall, they just literally like mouth agape half the time in those days. And then, so the experience, it was the whole summer. And I came back and I just could not get it out of my mind. And especially also, I got exposed to Yellow Magic Orchestra. I don't know if any of you guys are into YMO, but man,
Yeah.
YMO is just like one of my favorite bands of all time.
Yeah.
And so I just had to get back there. And then so as soon as I went one more year to school, and then as soon as I got out of school, me and one of my friends that I told about it decided, okay, this year we're going back, and went back for 6 months and lived again with 3 or 4 different families all around Japan. And so culturally, this was like opening a massive door, like, and it was like, I remember going to Harajuku and being exposed to, for the first time, to Kraftwerk, hearing showroom dummies. And I thought, like, okay, this is, I don't know what, it was just incredible. So
Wow.
like, it was a kind of a very beautiful thing. And then, so each year, I mean, for a long time I didn't go back, but then each year for about the last 15 years, I've tried to go back every year. And so I guess my goal was, at one point, I thought, like, after I'd made music and after, getting through this whole thing, I thought, like, wow, I wonder if there's anybody that listens to our music here. I had no idea. And then one guy came up to me on the train one day in Tokyo and said, hey, are you a musician? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, what are you doing here? I said, oh, I'm just a tourist. And I was wondering, like, what our music. Oh, yeah. You got a scene here. Here, call this number. So I called this number of this girl named Felicia, and she basically set me up with, like, my first sort of like mini tour where I came solo, and I did a few DJ sets, and that was it. I was like, okay, I really have to see, where this leads. And then all of a sudden I started to realize that Skinny Puppy was not popular in Japan at all. Like, I mean, nobody really knew it. And then so I started collaborating with some artists there, and some people were saying, let's just make this more about us and having fun and not about Skinny Puppy. So that's when I started doing more of a solo idea about collaborating with my friends over there, Dijoto, Yuchirosa, Bal, and all sorts of, like, guys from the Tokyo Decadence crew, Sisen, and those guys. I just started thinking about, as you guys had asked earlier, do you ever make music to think about how it could be performed? That's when I first really started thinking I might make music for a DJ set. So I started making songs about the Shinkansen and stuff like that. So
that's the really fast train, for everybody wonder.
Yeah. So in the end, I really have to say that I don't know how many of you guys, I know Mo, you've been to Japan. I mean, the satisfaction you get out of playing in Japan,
it's
and
insane.
no matter how large the show is, no matter what, the people, and particularly the sound systems, I don't think I've ever heard the stuff I've made sound as good as it has in Japan. Like, just some incredible experiences with sound over there. So I actually hope to actually move there again. That's actually my goal right now, is that
that's always been one of my dreams too.
After COVID, me and my wife have been talking about this for years now, is that depending on what's going to happen, if we can tour again or whatever, I'd like to just base it out, like make a base there and see what it's like for 6 months, and move to, like, the Shonan area. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, around Kamakura. So it's very similar to California in a weird way. It's like beach, sort of like
nice weather,
cool area.
Cevin, how have you, dealt with the pandemic? Like, how have you, what ways have you found to stay positive and keep your mind off of the 24-hour kind of bad news cycle and all the other stuff that's going on in the world today?
Yeah, when Phil Western died in February 2019, I found myself in that situation where I was like, oh my God, this is like the same as what happened with Dwayne. And I thought, like, oh shit, I remember that it took me about like 5 years to get over Dwayne's death. And I said, oh no, this is approaching. I could feel the same feelings coming back. And to be quite honest, the first 6 or 8 months was, again, pretty bad. But my friend Chris Corner from IMX, which is really strange that he's born on the same day as Edward Caspell, we formed this friendship. And his whole take lately has been having a strong eye on being mindful and being mindfulness. And sort of like training your mind to like recognize things for what they are, as maybe okay, you've got a bad feeling or a bad thought, see it as a weather pattern, and be like, wow, man, it's a dark fucking energy in that cloud, but it's passing. Yeah, I can see bright side over there. When I started to make analogies like that and started to make connections like that, and especially with friends that were there kind of like supporting the mental health aspects of life, I found it just to be invaluable to share and discuss these things. So for me, the COVID thing is really like, I mean, I think I've been home since March 12th of last year, have not gone out, have not socialized, have not even seen Dre. And so basically, it's been more, luckily I had an album that I was working on that I could devote a better part of the year to. And that's basically what I did, is just devoted myself more to the studio. Even though at certain points I didn't even feel like studio inspired. And this whole thing with Trump and everything too has been just like,
I wondered, are you on social media much then?
Am I what?
Are you on social media much?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's how I basically have worked the last several years, but because I have a synthesizer company that does the Eurorack modules, and I have the toy company that does a toy thing, and then the music company has now turned into Patreon. The Patreon supporters have been like family. I gotta say, I've never received more support from a crew really in my life. You know, I was lucky enough to also make an album with Edward in 2017 that was supported by Pledge before Pledge went fucked up. And I couldn't believe it, that how people could get involved and then become like, you know, the reason why you make an album. And then so Patreon's become the same thing. It's really become, okay, I've got a concept and I'm going to follow it through, and you're going to have people support you all the way to the end with it. And it really feels like, you know, the beginning again, where you had a very small crew of people that were supportive, and they helped you to get to the finish line. So, you know, I'm so thankful for all these outlets. Without them, I don't even know what I would do.
Wow.
I wanted to add also, for anybody who is interested in Kevin's stuff, the Patreon page you have, you do some great interviews with people. I mean, you did recently an interview with Skinner as well, and you know, quite a few different musicians. And if anyone can go over there and is interested, you should definitely check it out. I recently did one with you as well.
Did one with you, Mo, and next weekend, believe it or not, or this Sunday, I've got Stephen Malander, and I'm just kind of
That's awesome.
pretty damn excited about that. You know, I'm lucky to have, you know, most of my friends, either through, you know, Severed Heads or
Yeah.
you know, the guys from 9 Inch Nails or whatever it might be.
So yeah, the Chris Verena episode was actually really good. I truly appreciated that interview.
It's amazing that Chris has become a professor. And I've also just learned yesterday in my studies for Steve that he's also a professor as well now. He has a PhD.
Yeah.
Stephen Malender's living in Australia, I heard, right? Is that?
Yeah, he
true?
was living in Australia till 2007, but now he's back in Brighton. But man, I hadn't really taken the time to explore Wrangler, the band that he has created since. And I really have to say, it kind of blew my mind. It's definitely like, if you really like Cabaret Voltaire, it's definitely like a continuation of definitely the same aesthetics. And his new solo album as well, Dada, is
yeah, I haven't had a chance to check it out yet.
Man, I hadn't either, and I just checked it out yesterday, and it blew my mind. It really, I mean, what's that? Temperature drop, cool down 12-inch from the 81. It's like one of my favorite 12 inches of all time.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well,
you know, it's cool that you've also been doing quite a bit of DJ sets. I mean, you played at Even Further Festival in Wisconsin, and you know, were the Drop Bass Network guys, who are legendary techno promoters in the Midwest. And I've seen the YouTube videos of you playing to Drive-In Movie Theater. He's opening a Drive-In Movie Theater. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool.
As a matter of fact, they just opened. They just played Return of the Jedi, and they had their first screening just a few days ago. I forgot what the other film was, but
yeah, I mean, you know, I can't. He wants to do shows there too, so it looks like it's going to be a good venue for the future when things return to normal.
we've seen each other, and hopefully when this pandemic is over, we can hang again soon, man.
Man, we have to.
Go buy some toys.
Well, hey, I just got myself one of Kevin's figures, the Basel, so I'll be waiting for that in the mail, dude.
Yeah, thank you. Rihanna's we're going to start on the hair today for him. Yeah, you got the one with the custom hair like I showed you.
Yeah, keep it colorful.
I think there's one left on the site if anybody's interested.
There you go. Keep it colorful, man. I wear all black all day, but I like my toys colorful.
We can see, like your instruments in the background there.
Exactly, man.
And cables.
What's what?
Awesome.
All right, man.
Oh, cheers, man.
Kevin, all the best for
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
what's to come.
Thank you once again, guys. All the best to you as well.
Cheers. Keep in touch.
Good to see you.
Thanks everyone for watching. Stay safe.
See you guys.